Hi everyone. As many of you know, Honey Badger Brigade's trial date is fast approaching. And by fast, I mean that more than 2.5 years after being summarily and arbitrarily booted from the Calgary Comic and Entertainment Expo, we are finally seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. To remind everyone what went down, Allison rented a booth at Calgary Expo to sell her graphic novel series Xenospora and promote the Honey Badgers. With the help of our supporters, we managed to crowdfund travel and expenses for a number of us to be in attendance and help run the booth. Mike, Dr. Randomer Cam Stevenson, Brian the Doge Martinez, Hannah Wallen, Sage Gerard, Anna Cherry and her significant other Shiva, former Honey Badger Rachel Edwards, and yours truly. To prepare for the event and other similar events across Western Canada, Allison, at her own expense, designed and commissioned a massive Xenospora-themed booth installation and ordered a metric fuck-ton of Honey Badger merchandise to sell. I remember being at Allison's dad's house in Calgary while a bunch of this stuff began to arrive, an installation that took her 4 months and cost her at least $6,000 to create. And then boxes and boxes of t-shirts and buttons and posters and prints and keychains and everything else. And copies of her graphic novel series, one of which she signed and gave to me, and which is now among my collection of things to never throw away. It took our team several hours to set up the installation, and we proudly displayed a banner supportive of Gamergate because so many individuals involved in Gamergate had supported our fundraiser and continue to support our work. And most of us just hung around the booth, chatting with people who inquired about what we were all about. There were a few people who approached, quickly selected a piece of Honey Badger merchandise, paid and moved on with as much alacrity as possible. They were clearly people who didn't want to be seen associating with us, even though they knew who we were. But others were friendly, welcoming, and warm. At the same time, there seemed to be people at the convention who did not want us there. Some staff were overheard talking about getting rid of some of the booths, while appearing to gesture toward our booth. We decided, with permission from convention staff, to set up a camera to film everything within the booth and began legally recording our interactions. Later that evening, Allison and Sage attended a panel discussion called Women into Comics. Being a female comic fan and an independent female comic creator, the topic was certainly one Allison would find of interest. I expect she felt going in that she would disagree with some or all of the panelists on some or all of their opinions and discussion points, but that's typical of any panel or lecture. At one point, the topic of men's rights activist types came up, and the following exchange occurred.
But that's just it. What had happened? At what point did all of a sudden did it become a dirty thing for women to be into this stuff? Like in the eyes of so many of these men's rights activist types, or.
Would you like us to field that question?
Huh?
Would you like us to field that question?
Sure, go for it.
Because I am a men's rights activist, so you can hate on me. The reason why I don't like feminism is because you promote this idea that women are defined by being victims. If you look at the context of all of your issues, men also face considerable problems as well. And they need to be brought into the story, and not just for men's sake, because this hides men's vulnerability, also for the sake of challenging the notion that women are defined as victims.
The discussion continued for a few more minutes and then moved on to other things. The rest of the evening was uneventful. We covered up our merchandise and headed back to Allison's dad's place, did a group live stream, and headed off to bed. It wasn't until after Allison and her husband had left for the convention the next morning that we noticed the growing uproar on social media. A couple dozen people on Twitter were taking Calgary Expo to task over hosting a Gamergate booth. At the convention, about half an hour before the doors were to be open to attendees, the guy in charge of security took Allison aside and told her we were being kicked out. He instructed her that he would not tell her how we had violated convention policy in front of witnesses or if he were being recorded. But she managed to talk him into letting her husband listen and observe. Allison was then told that there had been complaints on social media that she had engaged in harassment at the panel discussion the night before. He also informed her that she was banned for life from Calgary Expo and all its affiliated conventions, which amounts to a ban from all major comic expos in Western Canada. Interestingly, that panel discussion was filmed. A camera on a tripod in the room had recorded the entire event. To our knowledge, that video footage has never been publicly uploaded. The security guy gave us until 11 o'clock to remove our stuff and leave. Of course, the installation had taken 2 people about 5 hours to set up the night before, and some of it was damaged in the haste required to take it all down. We didn't make the deadline, and one of our fans stopped by our booth, discovered what was going on, and took a photo to tweet out with the news. He also, very helpfully, took 5 of us to a booth run by a Legal Action Foundation, where we discussed the situation with the foundation's representative. Then that group headed out to my car and left, while the others were forced to hand over their entry badges and made their way back home with the merchandise and equipment. Within a very brief time, feminist geek culture website The Mary Sue uploaded a lengthy article on the situation wherein they made a number of spurious claims about our conduct, not just at the convention, where they alleged we had harassed people, but also alleging Allison had lied about the group's identity on her booth application with the intent of infiltrating Calgary Expo under false pretenses. When Calgary Expo was asked over Twitter why they had ejected us from the convention, their response was to tweet a link to the Mary Sue's article, which contained these unsourced and false allegations that appeared to be original to the Mary Sue. Not long after, Calgary Expo deleted that tweet. To our knowledge, no investigation was done by Calgary Expo as to whether the allegations made against us on Twitter were accurate, and in fact, many of the tweeted allegations appear to have been made by people who could not have witnessed anything, as they weren't even at the convention. At no point did Calgary Expo or its representatives ask us to give our side of the story, despite their procedures as outlined in their exhibitor package requiring that they do so, and despite the fact that the definition of harassment within their policies includes false allegations. That is to say, according to their own policies and practices, we believe we were victims of harassment, not perpetrators. Calgary Expo itself describes false allegations as a form of harassment, and yet they either never investigated the veracity of any of the allegations made against us over Twitter or by the Mary Sue, or they knew that those allegations were false at the time they ejected us, and ejected us anyway. Because of the official partnership between Calgary Expo and the Mary Sue, and the fact that one of the Mary Sue's editors was at the Expo as a panelist and acting as a go-between to feed information to the author of the article, we have reason to believe that the Expo and the Mary Sue colluded to remove us by any means necessary, and then justified that decision to the public through the publishing of spurious allegations on the Mary Sue's website. We believe the Mary Sue incited Calgary Expo to breach their contract with Allison by lying to Calgary Expo's agents about our conduct and the nature of our group, and by expressing to Calgary Expo's agents their willingness to publish allegations they themselves knew or ought to have known were false. We believe Calgary Expo breached its contract with Allison despite the fact that they had in their possession evidence that would have shown the allegations made by the Mary Sue regarding our conduct were false, that they did so with no investigation and no opportunity for appeal, and then relied on the Mary Sue's publishing of those false allegations to publicly justify their decision. We believe that they did so with malice because, well, the individuals involved, they just don't like Gamergate or men's rights activists, and acting in their capacity as agents of the Mary Sue and Calgary Expo, conspired to give us the boot and then legitimate their decision to the public by lying about the situation through the Mary Sue's article. We believe that the lies themselves, disseminated publicly and then repeated in other media, constitute injurious falsehood against Alison Tiemann, and that she is entitled to monetary compensation for the reputational damage done to both properties owned and operated by her, Honey Badger Radio and Xenospora. The Mary Sue did not just wrongfully disparage us as people. They wrongfully and with malice disparaged Alison's business conduct, products, and services, with the intent of causing damage to her commercial relations and her ability to conduct trade. By its willful collusion with the Mary Sue prior to publication, and then by its promotion of the falsehoods in the article as public justification for its actions when it knew or should have known that the allegations were false, we believe Calgary Expo was complicit in the injurious falsehood against Alison's business properties and dealings. And that's why we're suing Calgary Expo and the Mary Sue. On a less legal note, we're also doing it in the hope of setting a precedent that will put huge organizations like Calgary Expo on notice. That they can't just breach their contracts for no reason other than they don't like your opinions, and then get their friends in the media to print falsehoods about your behavior in order to justify what they did. That they can't enforce their policies on their customers while choosing to ignore their own duties and responsibilities as detailed within those very same policies. That getting permission to speak and then politely stating one's disagreement with feminism or social justice advocacy is not harassment and does not justify intentionally damaging someone's business reputation through the spreading of false allegations. Our trial was supposed to be held over the course of 2 days earlier this year, but counsel for the defendants wasted 1.5 days of court time arguing that the case should be summarily dismissed based on 2 legal grounds. The first was a misnomer in Alison's statement of claim. Basically, they spent half a day nitpicking a typo, despite scads of case law indicating a misnomer alone is insufficient grounds to dismiss a case. They also argued that even had the defendants done everything we claim they did, these actions would not constitute injurious falsehood because, according to them, injurious falsehood is, quote, the same, end quote, as defamation, and further argued that the Provincial Court of Alberta has no jurisdiction to adjudicate defamation cases. The judge rightly found both arguments to be legally invalid and gave us the option of beginning the trial on the second half day and continuing it over 2 days in December, or to push the case to a different judge over 3 days at the end of November. We discussed beginning the trial then and there, but the only pressing reason to do so would be to introduce the testimony of our out-of-town witnesses so they wouldn't have to return later. Given that Alison can't legally be excluded from the courtroom, she is required to testify first, a process that could take a full day or longer, and we'd only have to bring everyone back again anyway. So, bringing everyone back again is what we're stuck doing. This is where we are. Our court day approaches. Despite what can only be described as obstructionism and attrition on the part of the defense in terms of wasting every cent of our money and every minute of our time and energy that they can cause us to waste, we will be in court in Calgary from the 28th to the 30th of November. If we win, this case will provide a template for others to use when large organizations abuse their power based on nothing more than someone's non-compliance with a popular orthodoxy. We followed all the rules. We complied with all the policies, procedures, and standards. And at the end of the day, we were ejected and banned because we disagree with the dominant ideology on gender, and because men's rights activists are somehow not welcome to voice our thoughts and opinions, even in a conversation about men's rights activists. I mean, seriously. Can't feminists talk a bunch of uninformed shit about what they think MRAs believe without some MRA stepping up and politely informing them what she actually believes is an MRA? I think that's harassment. Don't you? The Calgary Expo had a contractual obligation to Allison, and they violated it because she doesn't like feminism and dared to, with permission, politely explain why. The Mary Sue has a legal and ethical obligation to refrain from knowingly or recklessly publishing false and defamatory statements about people, groups, organizations, or businesses. This is why we are reaching out to the general anti-feminist and non-feminist community to help us with our battle. We have a bunch of people we need to bring to Calgary one more time to testify in court as to what happened. They live in Ohio, Illinois, Georgia, California, even the UK. We've managed to raise a fair bit so far to cover travel and accommodation costs, but we still have a ways to go. If you'd like to help us in our attempt to hold Calgary Expo and the Mary Sue accountable for their shitty behavior, please go to feedthebadger.com and throw a few coins in the hat. We're not in this fight with profit in mind. At the end of the day, even if we win and are awarded the largest amount authorized by the court, it's likely that we'll have spent more money on this endeavor than we'll ever get out of it, and it's probably going to be, hour for hour, the lowest paid job any of us has ever had. What we want is for a judge to agree that what was done to Allison and the rest of us by Calgary Expo and the Mary Sue is unacceptable and illegal. We want a decision on the books that will put them and organizations like them on notice that they can't just get away with this shit. A decision in our favor will make it easier for anyone who's been screwed over like we were to hold the wrongdoer accountable in a court of law in Canada. So again, if you'd like to help us bring this case to trial and fight for a precedent, there are just 4 days left in our fundraiser. Please think about it. Please throw a couple dollars in the hat. Every little bit helps. And then relied on the Mary Sue's publishing of false allegations to publicly justify their Motherfucker! I'm still talking! Everybody fuck off until I yell ollie ollie and free, okay?